A very warm welcome to you all. Today, our journey into this deep dive takes us into some deeply emotional
It
territory.
really does.
Yeah, we're exploring a stack of notes, letters, and historical records that detail the history of the Collins lineage. And it's a history that's, defined by the grief that shaped two remarkable women.
Right, and it's also about this massive ancient secret that rests literally right beneath Hogwarts Castle.
Exactly. I mean, history is usually taught to you as this grand tapestry of events, right? Like goblin rebellions or shifts in the ministry. But today, we're pulling on a single tear-stained thread.
I love that analogy. It's so true. We often look at wizarding histories through the lens of power or triumph, but what truly drives this specific narrative is just profound affection and devastating loss.
It really is. It's the story of how the quiet domestic grief of a mother and daughter in a country village is tied directly to this monumental, timeless sacrifice in the darkest dungeons of Hogwarts.
Yeah, and to really understand that connection, we have to start by looking at their present-day reality, right? We have to map out the geography of their heartbreak.
Right. So let's ground ourselves in the present. We are looking at Godric's Hollow.
Which is such a fascinating place on its own.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for anyone listening who pictures this quaint, entirely magical village, the reality is a lot more complex. It operates on this fascinating duality.
Yeah, it's a shared community. You've got magical families living completely discreetly right alongside muggles. It's honestly a masterclass in the everyday execution of the statute of secrecy.
It really is. Because, on one side of the central square, you have a completely mundane post office
Yeah,
and a muggle pub.
right.
Right.
But then if you have the ability to perceive the magical overlay, that same central square contains the War Memorial, the one that transforms into the statue of James, Lily, and Harry Potter.
Honoring the sacrifice of October 1981. Yeah. And the graveyard there holds centuries of ancient magical bloodlines.
It's just wild to think about. I mean, the mundane task of buying milk happens literally steps away from the physical remnants of monumental wizarding history.
Which honestly feels incredibly appropriate for the subjects of our deep dive today. Because living in this village, in the very cottage where their life together began, are Katherine and Agatha Collins.
Let's talk about them because they're fascinating.
Yeah, so let's break down who they are. Katherine is 40 years old. She is an English pureblood witch, a former Ravenclaw, and importantly, a highly skilled healer at St. Mungo's Hospital for Magical Maladies and Injuries.
And then there's her daughter, Agatha. She's an 18-year-old half-blood Hufflepuff.
Right. But, as you go through these sources, the defining feature of this household right now isn't really about who is there.
No, it's entirely about who is missing.
Exactly. The premature death of Anthony Collins. He was Catherine's husband and Agatha's father. And his absence, it operates almost like a living, breathing roommate in that cottage.
It's the catalyst for everything we are going to discuss. Anthony was a ministry curse breaker, and no loss was more devastating for this family than his passing.
I want to pause on Anthony's profession for a second, actually, because I think people often misunderstand what a curse breaker actually does.
Oh, definitely. They think it's just, waving a wand and yelling a quick counterspell.
Right. But it's not that simple, is it?
Not at all. I mean, curse breaking is essentially hostile magical architecture. A curse, especially an ancient one, isn't just a burst of negative energy. It's this intricately woven arithmetic equation designed to cause harm.
Or to protect a location, right?
Exactly, or destroy a specific target. So a curse breaker has to mathematically and magically deconstruct that equation while it is actively trying to kill them.
Wow.
Yeah, it requires a mind that is just immensely analytical, courageous, and capable of operating under extreme psychological pressure.
So Anthony was essentially a man who dismantled danger for a living.
He was.
And yet the danger eventually caught up with him. Which, this brings us back to Katherine. Because the psychological paradox of Katherine's current existence is almost too painful to think about.
It really is heartbreaking when you look at the details.
Because she is a healer. She spends her days at St. Mungo's fixing the broken, expertly reversing dark magic, mending shattered bones. She is exceptionally proficient in both spellcasting and potion making.
And that right there is the devastating crux of her existence. She possesses all this institutional knowledge, right? All the practical application to save lives.
Yeah.
Yet she carries this immense crushing guilt because she was entirely unable to heal the man she loved most.
It's the ultimate nightmare of the expert.
It really is. When you are conditioned to believe your skill can overcome physical tragedy, failing to do so when the stakes are absolute, just shatters your foundational understanding of the world.
It's like a master clockmaker watching time run out on their own life, completely powerless to stop the hands. How does someone carry that professional and personal failure without breaking?
Well, the mind compartmentalizes, and usually at a terrible cost to the nervous system. The records describe Catherine as reserved, earnest, deeply kind-hearted. But her Patronus is very telling.
Oh, right. It's a white swan, isn't it?
Yes, and in magical theory, a Patronus reflects the hidden innermost essence of the caster. A swan is elegant and fiercely protective, but it's also deeply steeped in mythological associations with solitary mourning.
Oh, wow. That is so symbolic.
And lifelong mating, too. So the dedication she brings to St. Mungo's now is inextricably linked to the one person she couldn't save.
She is just trying to balance an impossible cosmic ledger. Let's actually look at the primary sources here, because we have access to a deeply personal letter Catherine wrote to Anthony after his passing.
That letter is just, it's absolutely gut-wrenching.
It strips away all of that professional stoicism. I want to read a part of it and look at exactly what she chooses to focus on. She writes, they say time softens the blow, but I find I miss you more with every breath I take. I miss the way you made the tea, always a bit stronger than mine, and the steady, quiet strength you brought to this home.
That specific detail about the tea, that is the absolute hallmark of authentic grief.
Yeah, it's so small but so heavy.
Exactly. Because when we lose someone, we brace ourselves for the big things, birthdays, anniversaries. But true, pervasive grief lives in the disruption of our daily rhythms.
Right. It's the sensory memory she's confronted with every single morning in her kitchen.
Yes. The tea she brews herself will never taste quite right. It's a quiet, almost aggressive reminder that her world is permanently out of alignment.
And then she continues in the letter by shifting her focus to Agatha. She says, Agatha's growing so fast, love. She has your spirit, you know. She's just as brave and just as stubborn. How I wish you were here to see the witch she's becoming.
It shows how much Agatha reminds her of him.
And then she says, she wants to be just like me, but I pray she has your kindness to balance my wit. I'm trying my best to be everything she needs, but some days the weight of raising her alone feels too heavy to bear. Please, wherever you are, send me a bit of your courage.
Notice that specific quality she asks for. Courage.
Yeah, she doesn't ask for peace or comfort. She asks for courage.
Because Anthony wasn't merely a romantic partner. He was the source of a very specific kind of emotional bravery that Catherine has always felt she lacked.
To really understand why his death completely shattered her world, we have to rewind, don't we? We have to look at the emotional prison she lived in before she met him.
Absolutely. The architecture of a mother's grief is built squarely on the foundation of her childhood.
So let's open that door. Before she was Katherine Collins, healer and mother, she was Catherine Rose Taylor. She grew up in the sprawling London manor.
The only child of two pure-blood wizards, Eleanor and Edward Taylor.
Right. And the Taylor family wasn't just wealthy. They had a very specific generational legacy in potion making, specifically cures for magical ailments.
And we really need to analyze the psychology of a family steeped in potion making. It's not like charms or transfiguration, which often require, certain fluidity or emotional instinct.
Yeah, potions are rigid.
Exactly. Advanced potion making is a science of absolute precision. A single crushed beetle, or a half-turn counterclockwise, can turn a healing draft into a lethal poison.
So that obsession with control and perfect outcomes just bled directly into how Catherine was raised.
Yes, and the primary enforcer of that control was her mother, Eleanor.
Eleanor sounds, honestly, like a deeply difficult woman. She came from immense wealth, never held a profession herself, and she had Catherine relatively late in life.
And from the moment Catherine could walk, Eleanor demanded absolute perfection.
Right, because Catherine was highly intelligent. She loved books, played the piano, she was educated in the most rigorous, pure-blood manners, but she was actively forced to suppress her true, curious self.
It is the textbook definition of conditional love. She had to act exactly as Eleanor expected, constantly. Catherine was basically taught that her authentic self was unacceptable.
We have that one anecdote from the records that illustrates this so perfectly. The flying book.
Oh yes, the accidental magic incident.
Right. So when Catherine was 7 years old, she experienced her first significant burst of accidental magic. She wanted a book that was on a high shelf in the drawing room, and she made it fly down to her without a wand.
Which, from a developmental standpoint, is incredibly advanced. Wandless, nonverbal summoning at age 7. That's exceptional.
It really is. Her father, Edward, was actually genuinely impressed. But Eleanor's reaction, I mean, she coldly remarked that her daughter's first magical display could have been more remarkable.
It's just so crushing.
But wait, I want to ask about this. If Eleanor is obsessed with perfection and, pure blood supremacy, why on earth would she be disappointed with her 7-year-old performing highly advanced wandless magic?
Right.
Surely that proves the purity and power of her bloodline.
It's a fascinating contradiction. But you have to remember that accidental magic is, by definition, uncontrolled. It is an outburst of raw emotion.
I see.
For a woman like Eleanor, whose entire worldview is built on the rigorous control of variables, that potion maker's mindset, raw, uncontrolled emotion, is just vulgar to her.
So even if the result is powerful, the lack of discipline makes it offensive.
Precisely. She wasn't really critiquing the magic itself. She was punishing the lack of restraint.
That is deeply insidious. It instills this pervasive belief in a child that even their most remarkable talents are flawed if they aren't rigidly controlled.
And because she was an only child, Katherine was entirely isolated in this opulent manner. She had endless libraries, but absolutely zero emotional warmth.
So by the time she gets to Hogwarts and is sorted into Ravenclaw, she doesn't even know how to connect with people. She just walls herself off in the library.
She built an impenetrable psychological fortress to survive her mother. She learned that to feel was to invite criticism, so she just stopped expressing feeling.
But then in her 5th year at Hogwarts, the dynamic shifts entirely. She meets Anthony,
Anthony Joseph Collins.
a Gryffindor. And he represents literally everything she has been taught to suppress, right? He is expressive, free-spirited, emotionally transparent.
He was her complete opposite.
I was thinking about their dynamic through the lens of his future profession.
Oh, as a curse breaker.
Yeah. If Anthony becomes a curse breaker, someone who mathematically and magically dismantles hostile architecture, didn't he essentially do exactly that for Katherine?
Oh, that is a brilliant way to conceptualize it.
It's like he was a translating spell for her heart. He deciphered the emotions she was never allowed to speak. Her emotional walls were the very first wards he ever dismantled.
Yes, absolutely. Her family spent generations trying to brew cures for physical ailments, but Anthony provided the cure for her emotional paralysis. He patiently decoded those walls.
He validated her authentic self.
He did. So when Anthony dies prematurely when Agatha's only 10 years old,
Yeah.
Katherine doesn't just lose a husband.
She loses the man who liberated her.
Exactly. And suddenly, she is a single mother, absolutely terrified of reverting to her factory settings. She is terrified of becoming her mother, Eleanor.
And she actively fights against it, doesn't she? The record shows she is fiercely affectionate with Agatha. She strives to be the warm, attentive mother she never had.
But trauma is cyclical, you know. She is pouring all her energy into loving Agatha, but she is doing it while drowning in the unresolved guilt of failing to save her husband.
And a child, especially a deeply empathetic one, is going to absorb the reality of that quiet grief.
Regardless of how brightly the mother tries to paint the walls, yes.
Which brings us to the next generation. Let's talk about Agatha Erin Collins.
Born on a rainy January 18th.
She is an 18-year-old half-blood witch, currently in Hufflepuff. And the source material describes her as dreamy, shy, and someone who wears her emotions completely on her sleeve.
She is highly sensitive, highly empathetic, and frequently feels deeply lonely.
Agatha really is the synthesis of her parents' complexities, isn't she?
Oh, completely. She possesses Anthony's underlying spirit. You know, Katherine explicitly mentions Agatha's bravery and stubbornness, but she is entirely enveloped by her mother's sorrow.
Losing her father just before her 10th birthday, I mean, the entire foundation of her adolescence was built on the shaky ground of his sudden absence.
And the way she copes with this is very telling. The records note that she struggles to make friends because of deep-seated insecurities, but her primary coping mechanism is isolation.
Right. Whenever she feels she is unwanted or when she senses tension, she just physically and emotionally withdraws.
Which raises a critical point about the emotional mechanics of empathetic children in magical households.
Right.
Agatha is a Hufflepuff, a house defined by loyalty and a deep sensitivity to community.
Right.
When an empathetic child grows up in a home saturated with unspoken grief, they function as a psychic sponge. Katherine's desperate attempts to hide her pain create an emotional vacuum, and Agatha steps in to absorb that tension.
But wait, I want to challenge that interpretation a bit. When Agatha isolates herself, is that really a noble, empathetic sacrifice? Or is she subconsciously mimicking the exact same emotional walls her mother built during her own childhood?
That is a harsh but very vital perspective.
Because, isn't Katherine accidentally creating the very prison she tried to escape? Eleanor used coldness to force Katherine into isolation. Is Katherine's overwhelming, unexpressed grief forcing Agatha into the same isolation?
It is entirely possible that Agatha is mirroring those survival tactics. She sees this brilliant, capable healer collapsing internally. Agatha might internalize the idea that if someone as strong as her mom is breaking, then her own needs are just a burden.
If I make myself small, I won't cause Mom any more stress.
Exactly. Whether it is noble empathy or inherited repression, the result is the same. An 18-year-old girl isolating herself from the world.
Let's look at the evidence for that. We have a letter Agatha wrote to her mother, and it reads less like a daughter seeking comfort and more like a caretaker providing it.
The role reversal is striking.
She writes, Mom, you're my rock mom. You're a brilliant witch and the best mummy in the whole world. Thank you for being my mom, for looking after me and keeping me safe. I want to be just like you when I grow up. Mom, don't forget that Dad will always be with us, tucked away in our hearts.
Just look at the emotional labor occurring in that final sentence. Don't forget that Dad will always be with us.
An 18-year-old trying to be the emotional anchor for her adult mother.
It highlights the profound love between them, absolutely.
Yeah.
But it also exposes the immense weight Agatha carries. She is constantly monitoring her mother's emotional state.
Okay, so we have established the geography of this family's heartbreak. It is a quiet, intensely intimate domestic grief playing out in Godric's Hollow.
A mother crushed by guilt, a daughter carrying the ghost of her father.
But what makes this deep dive truly extraordinary is that this quiet cottage is on a direct collision course with an epic, world-altering history.
Yes, this is where the scope expands massively.
Because Katherine and Agatha are not alone, their lineage holds an ancestral shadow, a guardian tied to a secret so unimaginably dangerous, it requires us to step out of the present and plunge into the late 19th century.
To understand the shadow hanging over Agatha, we must examine the epic sacrifice of her thrice great-grandmother, Erin Rose Miller.
Let's talk about Erin, born in 1875 in Salem, Massachusetts, and immediately we have a societal complication, don't we? She was born to a no-mage family.
A no-mage-born witch in late 19th century Massachusetts. You can just imagine the fear and confusion in a family with zero magical context, suddenly dealing with a child who defies the laws of physics.
Right. And eventually, an envoy from Ilvermorny School of Witchcraft and Wizardry intervenes. She is enrolled and sorted into the House of Thunderbird.
Which is fascinating because Thunderbird traditionally represents the soul of a witch or wizard, and it explicitly favors adventurers.
But her adventure takes a completely unprecedented turn during her 15th year, right? She begins to see things.
Yes. She confides in a professor that she is perceiving sights veiled from the eyes of every other witch and wizard around her.
And we really need to define exactly what it means to see this specific magic, because it's not normal spell casting.
No, it's not. The wizarding world relies heavily on wand magic spells, specific gestures that channel magic into predictable outcomes. It's essentially a tool.
Like typing commands into a keyboard.
Exactly. But what Erin was seeing was ancient magic. This is the raw, primal source code of reality. It doesn't require an incantation. It is tied to the emotional and elemental forces of the earth.
And she could physically see its remnants lingering in the air.
Like glowing, volatile fault lines.
To put that into perspective for you listening, imagine finding out you have 20/20 vision in a world where everyone else is completely blind. But the only things you can clearly see are hidden, unexploded bombs.
That is exactly what it was like.
Just massive landmines buried beneath the pavement, and everyone else is just casually walking over them. That was Erin's daily reality at 15.
And Ilvermorny recognized the sheer danger of this anomaly. Her professor happened to be acquainted with Professor Eleazar Fig.
Scholar across the Atlantic at Hogwarts.
Right, and Fig's late wife, Miriam, had dedicated her life to researching this exact phenomenon of ancient magic. So, in a drastic maneuver, 15-year-old Erin is uprooted.
She is transferred from America to Scotland.
Enrolled at Hogwarts and sorted into Gryffindor to study directly under Professor Fig.
Let's just stop and look at the sheer culture shock and psychological toll of that.
Right.
She's already a no-mage-born witch, meaning she is perpetually playing catch-up in the magical world.
Oh, definitely.
And now she is shipped across an ocean, dropped into a 500-year-old Scottish castle surrounded by purebloods, and told she is the only person alive who can perceive this forgotten apocalyptic power.
The immense isolation she must have felt, it's staggering.
And the wizarding world did not welcome her gently, did they? The records state that upon her very arrival in Scotland, before she even reached the castle doors, the carriage transporting her and Professor Fig was literally attacked by a dragon.
Yes. A literal dragon.
Wait, really? A dragon in the Scottish Highlands in the late 1800s? How is a 15-year-old surviving a dragon attack on her morning commute? Is that the ancient magic kicking in instinctively?
Exactly that. Because ancient magic is tied to primal emotion and survival instinct, it often manifests violently in moments of extreme peril. It bypasses the need for formal wand training.
Wow.
She survived, but it served as a dark omen. Under Professor Fig's mentorship, she begins to trace the origins of her ability. This investigation leads her beneath the school to a hidden location known as the Map Chamber.
And here she encounters the trials of the Four Keepers: Percival Rackham, Charles Rookwood, Nahum Fitzgerald, and Sam Bukar.
4 ancient wizards and witches who also possess the ability to wield ancient magic.
But they didn't just wield it, they hoarded it. What exactly were they keeping down there?
They were guarding a repository of corrupted ancient magic. And to understand the corruption, we have to look at the theory of emotional extraction.
Okay, lay that out for us.
Well, a previous wielder of this magic, a witch named Isadora Morganach, believed she could use ancient magic to literally extract emotional pain from human beings,
Right.
to cure them of their suffering.
That sounds noble, but
But pain is a fundamental component of the human soul. When you extract raw, agonizing grief and bottle it up, it doesn't just disappear. It ferments.
mutates.
It mutates into a highly volatile, destructive force. The Keepers realized this too late, and they buried this massive reservoir of corrupted, concentrated agony deep beneath Hogwarts.
Okay, this is the defining aha moment of our deep dive.
Oh,
Think about the thematic resonance here.
it's incredible.
Isadora used ancient magic to extract and store emotional pain because she wanted to cure people, right? Exactly like Katherine's potion-making ancestors tried to brew cures for every ailment.
Yes.
And what happened? The stored pain became a bomb. It proves that you cannot simply extract or suppress grief without catastrophic consequences, which is exactly what Katherine and Agatha are doing right now in Godric's Hollow. They are bottling up their unexpressed grief.
The parallel is chilling, isn't it? The Keepers built a physical repository for suppressed pain beneath the earth. Katherine and Agatha have built a psychological repository for suppressed pain in their cottage.
And the Keepers established rigorous trials to ensure that anyone who discovered this repository had the moral fortitude to leave it sealed. Erin had to undergo these brutal trials.
But Erin isn't just dealing with puzzles set by dead portraits. She didn't just have to look at these bombs. She had to stop a war over them.
Right, because she is actively fighting a two-front war against two terrifying antagonists.
First, you have a ruthless goblin named Ranrock, and allied with him is a dark wizard named Victor Rookwood.
Who happens to be a descendant of one of the Keepers. Let's analyze the motivations here. Why are they allied?
Well, goblin magic is distinct from wizard magic. They don't use wands, and there is centuries of deep-seated bitterness regarding their systemic marginalization by wizard kind.
Right, that's well documented.
Ranrock discovered the existence of this corrupted ancient magic. He realized that if he could harness this concentrated reservoir of negative emotion, he could weaponize it to overthrow the wizarding hierarchy.
He wanted to use the bottled agony of wizards to destroy them. And what does Rookwood get out of this alliance?
Entitlement. Rookwood believed that because his ancestor was a keeper, the power belonged to his bloodline. He viewed Ranrock merely as a tool to excavate his inheritance.
But their combined forces created an overwhelming threat. Erin, a 15-year-old no-mage-born student, was forced to act as the sole vanguard against an army of loyalist goblins and a syndicate of dark wizards.
The pressure is just inconceivable. She's trying to pass her OWL exams while dismantling a terrorist network.
And this all culminates in a massive confrontation deep in the caverns beneath Hogwarts. Ranrock manages to breach the repository.
He does. He taps directly into the corrupted ancient magic.
And the physics of what happens next are terrifying. I mean, how does a goblin physically transform into a dragon?
It comes back to the nature of the corruption. Remember, this magic is concentrated, unadulterated emotional agony and rage.
Right.
When Ranrock absorbed it, the magic overwhelmed his physical form. It morphed his biology to reflect the primal, monstrous fury within him. He didn't just cast a transfiguration spell. The corrupted magic transfigured him from the inside out.
Into a terrifying, dark magic-fueled dragon. So Erin is facing a dragon. Again.
The symbolism is perfect. She arrived facing dragon, and she faces one at the climax.
But she isn't completely alone in this cavern, is she? Professor Fig is with her.
Yes. Professor Eleazar Fig, her mentor, fights by her side. But the cost of this battle is absolute. In the desperate struggle to subdue Ranrock and prevent the corrupted magic from breaching the surface, Professor Fig gives his life.
He is killed. I really want to focus on the psychological devastation of that moment for Erin. Fig wasn't just a teacher.
No, not at all.
For a no-mage-born girl, ripped from her home, who saw things no one else could see, Fig was the only person who validated her reality. He was her Anthony Collins.
Oh, wow.
And he dies right in front of her.
The trauma is unfathomable. But through that sheer grief and adrenaline, Erin manages to defeat Ranrock. Furthermore, she makes the agonizing decision to reseal the repository.
She contains the volatile magic. She absorbs the physical and magical fallout of that containment. She single-handedly prevents an apocalyptic war, and the broader wizarding world remains entirely oblivious.
She saves the world in secret.
And what happens after? She graduates. She eventually returns to America for a time. She marries a half-blood wizard named Nicholas Alexander Collins. She has children.
She tries to build a normal life.
But the records state that Erin Collins died at the age of 50 from natural causes. 50 is incredibly young for a witch.
It is entirely likely that wielding and containing that much raw, corrupted ancient magic irreparably degraded her physical form. Her body simply gave out.
But her death is where her story transitions from heroic to truly legendary. Because when Erin dies, her spirit does not seek the path to the beyond. She refuses to cross over.
She chooses to become a ghost, and she travels back across the ocean to Hogwarts.
Let's discuss this, because most ghosts we hear about in the wizarding world stick around because they are terrified of what comes after death, or they have some petty grievance.
Right, it's often a sign of cowardice or an unhealthy attachment to the material world.
But did Erin stick around because she was terrified of what would happen to the living if she left?
Exactly. Erin's ghostly existence is a manifestation of pure, unadulterated duty. She knew that the corrupted magic was still down there. She knew that the keepers were just portraits. They couldn't physically intervene if someone else tried to breach it.
So she bound her own soul to the earthly plane.
She sacrificed her eternal rest to become the eternal secret keeper of the repository. She locked herself in purgatory to protect the living.
She has paced those pitch-black caverns beneath the castle for over a century. A no-mage-born girl from Salem, forever walking the stones of Scotland, just waiting.
Because she knows that the ability to wield ancient magic is genetic. It will eventually surface again in her bloodline. She is waiting to guide the next heir.
And this brings us crashing back to the present day, because the epic, apocalyptic timeline of the 19th century has just intersected with the quiet, tear-stained timeline in Godric's Hollow.
The inevitable collision of timelines.
The soul Erin has been waiting for, the student who has finally manifested the ability to perceive and command ancient magic, is none other than her thrice great-granddaughter.
Agatha Collins.
Agatha Collins. I need us to really process the sheer magnitude of this revelation. Let's look at the psychological profile we built of Agatha.
Right, the shy, sensitive 18-year-old.
She cries when she feels unwanted. She writes sweet, desperate letters to her grieving mother. She hides in her room to avoid causing tension. And she is the inheritor of the most volatile, untamable, world-shattering magic in existence.
The irony is breathtaking, especially when you consider the family's recent history. Katherine's ancestors demanded absolute control over magical variables. Anthony spent his life mathematically dismantling dangerous magic.
Both parents represent the intellectual control of magic.
Yet their daughter is the living vessel for a magic that defies all control, a magic fueled entirely by raw emotion.
And Erin Rose Miller, as a ghost, has been watching her. Erin watches Agatha navigate the halls of Hogwarts, knowing that the blood in this grieving girl's veins is the ultimate key to the repository.
This forces us to reevaluate everything about Agatha's emotional state. We established earlier that Agatha is a psychic sponge, right? Absorbing her mother's unexpressed grief.
Yeah.
We also know that the ancient magic beneath Hogwarts was corrupted because Isadora extracted and stored raw emotional pain. The magic is highly responsive to sorrow.
And Agatha is practically vibrating with stored sorrow.
Exactly. The very traits that make her a sensitive, loyal daughter might be the exact traits that cause this ancient magic to respond violently to her.
This raises a vital, terrifying question for you to consider as we wrap up this deep dive. We have established that Agatha has profound empathy and an intimate daily experience with the devastating loss of her father. Does this emotional depth make her perfectly suited to understand and finally heal this corrupted magic? Or does her tendency to suppress her own emotions make her a terrifyingly vulnerable target?
Is her sensitive heart her greatest weapon or her biggest liability?
Exactly.
If we draw a direct comparison to Erin, Erin was thrust into a war, but she had a fierce, adventurous spirit. She was a thunderbird. She fought dragons.
And Agatha is a Hufflepuff who prefers to isolate herself when she's upset. The contrast is massive.
But perhaps, just perhaps, a warrior is not what the magic requires right now. The Keepers fought it. Isadora extracted it. Erin contained it. Maybe what the magic actually needs is someone gentle enough to understand it.
However, the risk is apocalyptic. If Agatha's emotional walls shatter under the combined weight of her inherited grief and this ancient power, the fallout won't just destroy her family.
It could fracture the entire wizarding world.
It is an unbelievable synthesis when you step back and look at the entire tapestry. We started this deep dive looking at a mundane detail, a cup of tea brewed slightly too strong in a cottage in Godric's Hollow.
And we followed the logic of that quiet grief all the way down to a roaring, dark magic dragon and an ancient secret guarded by a century-old ghost.
It is a single lineage completely defined by profound love, by devastating loss, and by an unimaginable sense of duty.
And if we extrapolate this to the broader human experience, it serves as a profound reminder of the unseen forces shaping our own lives. We all carry invisible legacies,
Oh, absolutely.
We carry the burdens, the unspoken traumas, and the hidden strengths of our ancestors. The personal, quiet heartache you might be experiencing today, much like Catherine's, often sits atop deep historical foundations that you are entirely unaware of.
Agatha truly believes she is just a lonely girl missing her father. She does not yet comprehend that her grief is the key to an ancient world.
It's incredibly humbling to think about.
It makes you wonder what dormant histories and unspoken legacies are buried beneath your own feet, waiting for the right moment to surface. I want to leave you with one final, lingering thought to explore long after this deep dive ends.
A provocative question.
Erin Rose Miller sacrificed her eternal rest, choosing a century of darkness to guard this magic, waiting for an heir strong enough to take up the mantle. Someday, very soon, Agatha Collins will walk down the stone steps into those dungeons, guided by a gift she barely understands.
And she will finally lock eyes with the ghostly ancestor who's been watching her all her life.
When that happens, and the truth is laid bare, will Agatha be forced to make the exact same choice? Will she have to sacrifice her own future and the quiet, fragile sanctuary her mother fought so incredibly hard to build, simply for the sake of the world?
It is a chilling but entirely necessary question.
Thank you so much for joining us on this exploration. Keep questioning the histories hidden around you, and remember, sometimes the quietest grief holds the loudest magic. Until next time.